Straight after this session, he will be staying on stage for the final panel, Breakthrough Innovation for a New World. Now, I would like to introduce you to His Royal Highness Emir Mohammed Sanusi II, Emir of Kano and former Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. His Royal Highness is a highly respected banker and member of the international financial community, a respected Islamic scholar, and a powerful voice in the global fight against corruption. Please welcome His Royal Highness to the stage.
Ladies and gentlemen, Your Highness, a very warm welcome to you. We are delighted to have you with us here in Dubai. The last couple of times I think that you and I have spoken, we have been wrapped up in the snowy peaks of Davos for the World Economic Forum. So it makes a very, very nice change for us to be here in Dubai. Let me start big picture. A strong message here has been that the model of the Islamic economy has been extremely resilient in the face of many headwinds. How big a game changer do you think is the Islamic economy, is Islamic finance, not just for the region, but for the global economy?
I think in a sense, a fundamental element of Islamic finance, which is its connection to the real economy, goes to the heart of what economics should be. The fact that Islamic finance avoids speculation means that it may not be the biggest part of the world economy, but certainly it is the one that is most prepared for dealing with shocks. Now, obviously, the other building blocks have to be there. You've got to have a strong economic policy, you've got to have good risk management, you've got to have good personnel and technical skills, you've got to have technology. But all things being equal, an Islamic financial system that is linked to real production of goods and services is better prepared to cope with these shocks, and the world has a lot to learn from that.
What do you think, Your Highness, threatens it most? Is it a lack of harmonization? Some might say standardization. Is it issues of corruption, of nepotism, of financial mismanagement, or a mix of all of that?
I think the greatest challenge for Islamic finance is one of awareness, and the fact that you cannot separate branding from other brands. So when you say Islamic finance, at the same time you've got all sorts of things happening in the name of Islam that the world does not like. It could affect Islamic finance negatively. So you do have people in some parts of the world who think Islamic banks, for example, are involved in terrorist financing. It's ignorance, but it's something we've got to deal with. But in terms of acceptability, when you look at what's happening in the UK, when you look at Africa, you look at South Africa, Senegal, Gambia, Cote d'Ivoire, we're at a point where the world understands that these are products. The corruption in the sector is not more than the corruption in finance everywhere. The world financial centers are notoriously corrupt. Wall Street is not free of corruption. Maybe, in fact, the Islamic financial system has been less corrupt in that sense, in terms of actual cases of corruption. So that is not a problem. But awareness, yes, and the efforts of regulators to keep up with the fast pace of growth has to continue.
We will come back to corruption and issues of financial mismanagement, but staying with Islamic finance and Islamic banking, one of the things we spoke about on a panel with chief executives of Islamic banks yesterday was this issue of convincing a sophisticated audience investor that you are different from the conventional banks out there. Is that one of the biggest challenges they face, would you say?
I think that it's a challenge, but I think it comes to awareness. If you actually put on the table the details of what you have and the nature of the risk-sharing arrangements that you have, most investors today would understand that. You're moving away from straight loans. I think most fund managers understand what it's like to be in a profit-sharing arrangement. They know what it's like to assess the risks. They know what it's like to forecast profitability. And when they see that you've done that core work, they would invest. Now, what I would not like to do is pretend that Islamic finance is always totally different from conventional finance. There are differences, but there are many areas in which there is convergence and there are similarities with some forms of ethical finance, for example. So mainstreaming Islamic finance is one way to get investors on board. They're speaking their language, using terminology that they understand. Maybe when you use sukuk, people don't understand the term. Maybe when you use musharaka or mudaraba, they don't understand the term. We could find an English equivalent that's as close to what they're used to as possible. And hey, you know, they've studied this in finance school, they've studied this in business school, are they able to understand that?
You know, another big issue we talked about yesterday was one of the main themes of that panel was whether banks, and this is something we heard of in a session before that with Mohammed Yunus, whether banks are doing enough for the different Islamic economy sectors. Is the onus on the banks to help the economy? Should the economy perhaps be doing a little bit more to sell itself to the banks? What is your view on that?
The problem with banks in general is that they're profit-making organizations, and when they build their portfolios, they build their portfolios in a manner that they see as the lowest risk, highest profit manner. So whether it's conventional or Islamic banks, as they grow, the tendency is that they would rather do a small number of very good loans than a very large number of risky loans that will have difficulty managing. The challenge is the same challenge that regulators face when they deal with financial inclusion and trying to get financial services to the poor. It's about better research, better product offering and differentiation. It's about the use of technology. If you look at a bank like Equity Bank in Kenya, the use of mobile phones and technology has enabled them to deliver services to the poor. And I think it's about looking at what institutions like that in conventional banking have done. How do you use mobile phones? How do you use POSs? How do you use low-cost service delivery structures? How do you use agents to give loans and collect and monitor and manage? If you're able to do that in a risk-free manner, or fairly in a properly managed less risky manner, then the banks will do it, but it will take time.
Are you optimistic that we are moving at the right pace and there is enough engagement with the economy from these financial institutions? Are we moving in the right direction?
I think financial institutions generally make the right noises. To be frank, I worked in a commercial bank.
Is that enough, making the right noise?
No, I don't think so. I think the regulators have to actually force institutions and push institutions and encourage them, and also provide support. Some things need to be subsidized. The government may need to invest in technology, because after all, help them poor. Secondly, you've got to create an economy around which you can lend. Finance is only one element. I think this is a problem that most politicians do not understand. If you want to lend to a poor farmer, the farmer needs to have high-yield variety of seeds. He needs to have good farming practices. You need to have irrigation. You need to have fertilizers. It's not enough to give him money, because no matter how much money you give to the farmer, if he doesn't have the productivity or the access to markets, it's going to be a bad loan. So there has to be an economy to which you must lend. So financial inclusion involves banks, but there's also an onus on government to create an economy. The electricity, the infrastructure, the training, the access to markets, the good pricing, those are essential for finance to come in.
You know, I mentioned Mohammed Yunus yesterday when he was on this stage. He said, "I'm not blaming you," talking to the banks. He said, "Bankers are good people. It's the system and the concept that is wrongly designed." Is that a little bit too harsh?
Well, I think bankers deserve to take harsh words all the time. I'm not one, and I have been a banker. No, I met a group in Nigeria recently that's trying to set up an Islamic bank, and what they told me, very interestingly, was they talked to a number of banks. I think they talked to an Islamic bank in the Sudan. And what they found was that their microfinance banking model was extremely successful. And they would like to have an Islamic bank that is a microfinance bank. And I was excited about that. I haven't studied it in great detail. Obviously, Mohammed Yunus has done a fantastic job, and he's a very good example of what we can do with the poor. Many people have tried to replicate the model. Some have used it to extort. As you know, the microfinance model has been abused itself because the poor people are also vulnerable. They are uneducated. So you don't need to just have the person. You need to have the values and the character and the desire to actually help. If you approach it with the same profit maximizing mindset, you could actually find that microfinance banks are more exploitative than commercial banks. So the whole idea of regulation is extremely important, and the idea that you're going to make a lot of money over a very large number of diversified assets rather than a very small number of large assets. That is conceptual, and that entire concept has to be in place. Otherwise, even the microfinance model could be used.
You know, OIC markets are the prime markets for many Islamic banks, but these are often very tough, very unforgiving environments with security reasons, political issues, a sector that's been overbanked, for example. But these are the markets often for Islamic banks. How much does that, or should that, worry the sector in terms of its future, in terms of its growth, that is often its core market?
Well, there's nothing that says OIC markets have to be the market for Islamic banks. I mean, the Western banks moved into emerging markets when they realized the markets were tight. There's no reason why Islamic banking should not move into England, into France, into Germany, into the United States.
Which is happening.
And that's what they should do. There's absolutely no reason why the scope of the Islamic financial products has to be limited to the geographical area designated by Muslims.
Let's move back to regulation, rather to corruption, to nepotism, to financial mismanagement. In your new role, you're no longer a central bank governor, but as Emir now. How much are you able to change when it comes to these issues? Clearly, you've been a crusader against corruption, against nepotism, against financial mismanagement. What are you able to do now in this new role, and how influential can you be?
My role is largely advisory and influential, and I'm able to speak, obviously, to the highest levels of government in a sense, and maybe in a way that I wasn't able to as governor of central bank, and that's about all I can do. We're lucky in our country to have elected a president that has a history against corruption. The real challenge we have is to advise on the other things that need to be done. It's not enough to fight against corruption in, say, the whole sector. We've got to look at the judiciary and the court system. As governor of central bank, we had a number of corrupt bankers that were facing trial, but they used very expensive lawyers and all sorts of technicalities to delay trial. So for 3-4 years, we could put them in jail. We got only one of them jailed. And I think that entire process needs to be looked at. Yeah. If you have an open and shut case, there must be a case of bringing justice without delay. We also need to look at the structures. In most of our countries, we allow the governments and states to have sites that are there for rent-seeking. Now, in those situations, it all depends on the individual. If you have a very good leader who's not corrupt, then the system runs well. If you have a corrupt leader, then the system does not. You need to assume that there is a possibility that you're going to have people who are not as honest as you run the government, and you need to take away from them the opportunities that exist for them to steal.
You mentioned your new president, and that gives you cause for optimism. This clearly, the direction clearly though needs to come from the top, from government, from policymakers. How optimistic are you generally in this space?
I think the direction is clear in terms of fighting corruption and in terms of security. I think we need to have greater clarity in terms of economic policy and ideology, monetary policy, fiscal policy, and an understanding of where Nigeria sits in the global economy and some of the progress that we've made over the last few years so that we do not lose it. But again, he's not an economist. We'll wait for the ministers and we have an economic team. Hopefully that is what will feed into that policy making. But if you asked any Nigerian in 2015 for the elections, what are the two biggest problems facing the country, he would say corruption and security. And this is a former general who has a strong anti-corruption credential, and therefore he's the best person to address those two issues. But having addressed those two, it's not enough. You've got to still build an economy, have growth, infrastructure, education, healthcare, and that's why he needs a team around him.
And we will come back to those foundations in just a second. But before we do, I want to talk to you about the macroeconomic context. In 2013, when we spoke, again in Davos, you were wrapped up in your scarf in the snow, as was I. Africa was the darling of the markets. Emerging markets were the darling of the international community. There is a sense now, since then, that investors are running for the exits. How concerned are you for Nigeria's growth and indeed growth in the region?
Well, first of all, the nature of investments that have been attracted by emerging markets have always been short-term investments, portfolio flows, which tend to come in very quickly and then fly out very quickly. And I think that we've understood from previous crises. If you look at the Asian countries, the fundamentals in terms of having moved forward structural reform, if you look at Malaysia, look at Thailand, look at China, the fundamentals remain strong. In Africa, unfortunately, for most of the big economies, structural reform has not moved very fast. You do have very, very good examples in Africa. Ethiopia has done a tremendous amount of work in terms of structural reform. If you look at what they've done with coffee, what they've done with leather, what they've done with cement, you'll be impressed. If you look at some of the progress made by Tanzania and Kenya, again, you're impressed. The sad thing about Africa is that the biggest economies, South Africa, Nigeria, Egypt, Algeria, are suffering from huge governance problems. And those governance problems are not very good for investment. So we need to address those governance programs. We need to have greater clarity on economic policy. The response of monetary and fiscal authorities, say in my country, to the collapsing oil price, in my view, could have been much better. The management of the exchange rate has not been the appropriate. I don't think the idea of a fixed exchange rate at this point in time in the face of falling oil prices is a wise idea.
So you're saying, and I don't want to get too much into Nigerian economics, but you're saying you do not agree with the current policy of the central bank of Nigeria?
I think there would have been better choices because you made a choice to protect the exchange rate and reserves, and you allowed the real economy to suffer. When you have 167 million people, you cannot afford to have economic growth of 2%. When you look at 7%, I would rather have a weaker currency supported by foreign inflows, okay, and maintain import levels and have economic growth. Imports have shrunk 30%, and that's huge by any standards, and that has really affected economic growth.
How worrying, just quickly, bigger picture, stepping even further back, this imminent lift-off, increase in interest rates in the United States, quantitative easing in Europe, throw the oil price in there as well. Just how worrisome is the really big macroeconomic context for you now?
Well, the end of QE, obviously, and the reversal of QE is going to lead to a slowdown in capital flows to emerging markets, and that will have an impact on exchange rates. Now, it depends on the countries. Countries that have had very strong structural reforms and have export-driven growth will benefit from it. Those countries that are dependent on domestic consumption are going to hurt. The major concern for me is that the emerging markets in general are less prepared in 2016 in terms of the balance sheets of governments to pursue counter-cyclical policies that they were in 2007, 2008. Many of them had huge fiscal buffers at that time. They had huge fiscal surpluses. They had huge reserves. And now we're going into a world where reserves have shrunk. Those buffers have been spent in fighting the last crisis, and it's not been long enough for them to have fully recovered. So even in the best of circumstances, emerging markets are going to have a difficulty if there is a big hit today.
How long is it going to go on?
I don't know. I think it's a question of how well the United States and the big economies manage their economy. I mean, we have always known China was going to slow down. Chinese growth could not continue inevitably forever. We always knew that the investment bubble in China would bust, the construction bubble would bust. I think everybody knew that, apart from the Chinese, or maybe they did evidence say it. I think the UK has been extremely well. Europe is now facing a migrant crisis. And you must remember that the situation in the Middle East, the issues with migration, the issue with oil prices have not helped. I do hope that Saudi Arabia and the big oil producers do understand that this scorched earth policy of creating a glut in the market is going to hurt everyone, and there is a need to firm up the market and get better prices for all of us.
You have talked a lot about, in your own country, about an uneven society, about poverty, about unemployment, lots of reasons for the youth of today to be radicalized. What do you think governments need to prioritize to protect the welfare of the young, of their people, and indeed try and prevent this sort of radicalization?
Something I picked up from Muhammad Yunus's statement yesterday at the opening was the importance of looking at people. It's a secular policy that economies about people. I think for too long we've looked at numbers. We look at GDP, we look at GDP growth, we look at inflation, we look at exchange rates, we look at capital market indexes. We're not looking at the human beings. And when you now begin to look at life expectancy, you look at child enrollment, you look at number of graduates, you look at jobs, you look at adult literacy, you begin to see the real impact of the economy. So, and very often you have countries that show the very best indices on GDP and foreign investments and so on, showing the worst indices when you look at the numbers. Now, if you take my country, for a long time, people counted Nigeria as one of the richest countries in Africa because we had oil. And nobody actually focused on the human development indices in certain parts of the country. Now, the most insecure parts of the country, the North and the Northeast in particular, have for a very long time been poorer than neighboring countries. If you look at the HDIs, Borno and Yobe, which is northeast of Nigeria, has been poorer than Niger and Cameroon and Chad for a very long time. So one is not surprised that that is the area where you have the highest level of instability. And a lot of the time, people talk about Islam and extremism, but it's not about Islam. You look at Latin America in the 70s, you look at South Africa during the ANC. Whenever you have marginalization, when you have poverty, when you have lack of opportunity, people are going to become something, and it's going to be an identity. These guys in Boko Haram don't even pray, they don't understand Islam. There is nothing Islamic about them, but they adopt it because it's a useful tool to express this.
Let's talk briefly about the handle of Boko Haram. Are you satisfied with what's being done now, that ultimately the root cause is being addressed?
I don't think the root cause is being addressed, but to address the root cause, we have to address the problem at hand. And at the moment we have a war, we have a group that's killing people, and therefore there has to be a military solution in the short term. But the military solution cannot be the final solution. The root cause has to go back to education, healthcare, opportunities, and economic growth, and investments in those areas. And until we do that, if it's not Boko Haram, it will be something else. It could be ethnicity, it could be race, it could be, it depends on what is the identity that offers the greatest opportunity for being appropriated for the purpose of expressing resentment and anger. And it's the same thing with Libya and Tunisia and Yemen and everywhere. If you have a large number of youth who are not employed, then they're going to find something that they're going to use to express their resentment against the system. So we do have to ask, what are those things that we are having in our societies that make us sit on a time bomb, and we need to diffuse that time bomb long term.
Is this the biggest problem, this underlying problem that is affecting most of the economies that we're talking about now? Or most of the societies, I should say, we're talking about now?
I think it is. I think we're in a world in which the rise of speculation, the focus on capital markets has created a very unequal society where a small percentage of the population controls the bulk of the wealth. And there hasn't been much focus on redistribution. Now, I've got nothing against economic growth, but and you do need growth in order to lift people out of poverty. But as you grow, you must make sure you don't leave the large part of your population behind. And this is really where politics comes in. It's about political choices. How do we tax? Look at Norway. I mean, Norway is a very rich society, but they have no qualms about huge taxes for the poor, for the rich, in order to break people out of poverty. And I think that the Muslim world, we need to do that. We need to pay more taxes. We need to focus more on redistribution. We need to stop people from piling billions and billions of dollars in bank accounts that they're never going to consume. They don't need, and that money can be used for poor people.
I heard you say in an interview recently that you've achieved everything you want to achieve.
In life, yes.
In life, yes. What is there? Nothing else?
No, just hope that I continue offering services and that I die well.
And what will we see the Emir of Kano doing now over the next year, 2, 3, 5 years?
I think what I have started in the last 1 year is to bring to the office my experiences from a government central bank, my connections with international finance. And I have a real opportunity to help address some of the real problems that we have in northern Nigeria among the Muslims. The problem with an attitude to Western education, the problem with better healthcare, the problem with building a modern economy, and these are things that I can help bring to bear. There's also the whole question of engaging the traditional religious institutions whose understanding of Islam and understanding of the role of Muslims in the world may have influenced some of the things we've seen in the past. And having studied Islamic law myself, I'm able to carry that engagement, and a few of them are willing to listen and to change. And if we can look at such things as family life, look at things like zakah and how it can be used for poverty alleviation. If you can look at the introducing modern education to the madrasas, those are real positive contributions that would ultimately affect the way Kano will feature in the future of the country.
Has it been hard for you to step back from central bank policy maker role that you played before? And if I could be so bold as to ask you whether there is any bitterness towards the way everything was handled?
No, not at all. For a number of reasons. First of all, this role is a role I've always wanted in my life. My grandfather was an Emir. I grew up in a palace. I never wanted anything other than to be an Emir of Kano. So I'm here. I'm thankful to God. I have no bitterness. Secondly, it was my choice. When I saw the corruption in the government, I knew that if you took on the president and the petroleum minister, you were taking on the most powerful people in the country. And there would be consequences. I knew what I was doing. I was ready to face the consequences. And to be honest, if you're working with a government that's extremely corrupt and they like you, then you're not doing the right thing. So it was bound to happen. It was a matter of time. So today we read that the petroleum assessment picked up by the British authorities for money laundering corruption. Now, I don't know how I would have looked at my children if I served that government and said nothing. And it came out after I left office that this was the most corrupt government in Nigeria. So for me, it was a decision I took for myself, a decision I'm very happy I took. I have no regrets. I hope all public officers will understand that power is transient. And if you're afraid of what will happen to you today and you don't say the truth, you might end up regretting it. They will leave office one day and impunity will have its own recompense. So no, I have no regrets and I have no bitterness whatsoever.
I'd like to finish up by going back to where we started. I spoke of the resilience of the Islamic economy, and this has been one of the themes of the last 2 days. Of course, one of the things that everyone tries to do at the end of a conference like this is to work out how to keep momentum going, how to look to the future and make sure that something comes of all of this. What would your advice be to this audience on the back of a conference like this one?
I think the greatest lesson that we have to learn from Islam is the need to build a real economy that's around people. And for most of the Muslim world, the excessive dependence on commodities is not consistent with that spirit. So I think what this country has done, and what a few of the Muslim countries have done, is all we need to keep doing. We need to use the oil money to build an economy that's for people, to build manufacturing, to build agriculture, to build services. And the thing with Islamic law is when you go out a very narrow realm of worship, that everything is permissible, apart from that which has been expressly prohibited. So you talked about tourism, for example, take the Hajj and the Umrah. In my country, we get 70,000, 100,000 pilgrims every year. The government is heavily involved, and now the private sector could do a great job providing the transportation, dealing with accommodation in Mecca, providing accommodation that's suitable in Muna, providing accommodation in Medina, and doing it very quickly. Right now, in my country, pilgrims end up with accommodation very far from the Haram because they have to wait for the government to have a budget and release money. A private sector operator could raise the finance, secure accommodation today for next year's Hajj, and that would be, well, would actually make even worship easier. So while it is purely religious function, when you talk about 2 million, 3 million people coming, converging in one country, it's a great opportunity for transportation, for accommodation, for feeding, and for organizing and logistics. If you look at the tragedy around the Hajj, what happened in the last 2 weeks, you can begin to ask questions beyond what happened today. I mean, it's happened over and over again. So we have 2 million, 3 million human beings converging on one place. It raises questions about the jurisprudence itself. And it's the job, I think, of the Muslim world to ask the scholars, is it really conceivable, is it really possible for 3-4 million people to converge in one place? A very tight corner of Saudi Arabia for 3 days, or are there resources in Islamic law that make it possible to free up some of this congestion and make it possible to perform these rites without the kind of risks that we're facing? And I do think there are, and it's an engagement that we need to have.
Your Highness, I'm going to stop our conversation there. I want to thank you very much indeed for your insight. It's been a great pleasure to meet you again, and in these surroundings, and in these temperatures, I must say.
Thank you.
His Highness Emir Mohammed Sanusi II, thank you very much indeed.